Welcome. Thank you all for coming to this workshop. It's called Rise Above It, Spiritual Development for Couples, or the Spiritual Dimension of Marriage. I know you've just had lunch, and perhaps some of you are feeling a little, don't want you to get sleepy, so if you want to stand up and move around a little bit, feel free, get your energy going.
We mean that. Okay.
Yes, you have our permission. If you start to get dozy, stand up and just jump around. All right, so we're the Silvermans. We've been married for 48 years. We have 7 children and 13 grandchildren and a host of wonderful daughter-in-laws and son-in-laws. So when Ray and I first met and fell in love, we wanted to have a good marriage. But like many who are falling in love, we believed that this was the one and that the Lord had brought us together. But we also knew that we didn't know how to do it very well. We had seen our parents struggle in their marriages and in their relationships and knew we didn't want to repeat some of their patterns. There were some good patterns there, but we didn't want to repeat all of the patterns. So, with the idea of having God in our relationship, we began a quest for how to have an eternal marriage, not till just death do us part.
We were living in Eau Claire, Wisconsin at the time. That's Star's hometown. And we went to the library, to the Eau Claire Public Library, because we were going to do a book on the eternity of marriage. And so we started doing our research like good students do. And we had a big pile of books. We said, not this one, not this one, not this one, not... Then there was this red book with gold letters, Conjugial Love. It says, this is it. Star, look at this. The book's already been written. It was just a wonderful experience. A whole new world opened up to us. It was a whole new way of seeing marriage.
So now fast forward about 10 years. Now we've come across the new church as an organization. We've joined the new church. Ray has entered theological school. He studied for the ministry, and now he's ordained. And we're in a pastorate in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, raising now 6 children. Shiloh, our youngest, hadn't been born yet. We had all 7 kids within 10 years. So we do things quickly. At this point, we were still relatively new to the new church. And we kept reading, particularly like the words of Jesus influencing us that said, if you love me, keep my commandments. And from the writings of the new church, the spiritual life is acquired solely through a life according to the commandments. And we thought, oh, this is what we're yearning for. We really want to have a spiritual life. We want to have a spiritual marriage. So we entered an in-depth study of the commandments and their application to life, not only at literal levels, but also at deeper levels. And we later called this program Rise Above It, Spiritual Development Through the 10 Commandments. Do any of you know of this program?
Look at that.
A few of you do. Okay. Right?
By now, like all couples, we had experienced some conflicts in our relationship, and we wanted to learn more about the how-tos of having a good marriage. Our research led us to the founders, the very founders of the Marriage Enrichment movement, and that was David and Vera Mace. This was back in 1986. And they had an organization called Association for Couples in Marriage Enrichment. They trained couples to be marriage enrichment trainers. We really liked that, so we signed up for their week-long retreat in Black Mountain, North Carolina. We arranged to have friends take care of our children while we were gone, and we learned wonderful things there at the Acme retreat. The program was called Acme, as I said. Their program covered commitment, communication, and conflict resolution. And this was the big thing. According to the Maces, commitment was not just about commitment to marriage. It was commitment to growth in marriage.
Wait, Ray, tell me that again. I thought when you get married, you're committed to your marriage.
Well, you are, but you're committed to growing personally as a human being.
Oh.
There's the famous triangle, she's growing, he's growing, and they're growing closer and closer to God. They're growing closer and closer to each other.
Very nice, thank you.
So this was the beginning of our studies in what's now called marriage education. The marriage enrichment term became marriage education.
Now, we know that many of you here today are in just really wonderful marriages, thriving marriages. And we think that many of you here today may be in struggling marriages. And maybe some of you here today have left a marriage. But we want you to thank you all for being here, because it's really important to be able to get out and to learn and to grow from where you are now. We can all grow from where we are now. Over the years, we've been fortunate enough to study a number of wonderful marriage programs with many of the leaders and the founders themselves. Years ago, maybe 10 or 15 years ago, Nita Holmes was the director of the marriage programs in Bernathen, and she was associated with Smart Marriages, where every year there would be the founders of the programs would all come, and everybody would come from around the world, all over the United States, and present, and thousands of people would come. You'd come to this week-long conference, but you could come earlier and take training programs with the founders, or stay later and take training programs. So Ray and I always extended ours. We'd take some on one side and we'd take some on the other. But it was such a learning experience for us. We actually got to present at 2 of these Smart Marriages conferences on the spiritual dimension of marriage. But we noticed as we were taking these programs, aspects of each of the programs fit very nicely into one or more of the commandments. We were always seeing the programs through the lens of the 10 Commandments and their applications to life. So this is what we'd like to present for you today.
So our goal for today is to provide the information and the encouragement we all need in order to enjoy the deepest blessings of true marriage love. As it is written in the final chapter of the book Conjugial Love, quote, "True conjugal love with its delights comes solely from the Lord and is given to those who live according to his commandments."
And as Jesus said, if you want to enter into life, keep the commandments. So let's get started.
Okay, commandment number 1, you shall love the Lord your God. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. One true God, one true love. The psychologist we want to talk about first is Ivan Pavlov. Everybody heard of Pavlov? And so this is the famous classical experiment where Pavlov had a dog, fed it, and every time he fed it, no, get this right, Star, for me. He
would
rang the bell,
and then he'd feed the dog.
He'd feed the dog. Ring the bell, feed the dog. Read the bell, feed the dog. And of course, the dog would begin to salivate before it was going to get food. Then there'd be no food. He'd just ring the bell and the dog would salivate. This is called now classical conditioning.
In terms of marriage enrichment, Dr. Willard Harley has a program called His Needs, Her Needs. And he talks about positive conditioning in the marriage relationship. Just like ringing the bell, the dog salivates. We want to have positive, loving associations with our spouse. So when Ray comes home and I see him, I want to have loving associations with Ray. I want to build up those loving associations.
And when I'm driving home and I see her car in the driveway, I'm so happy just to know that she's there. True story.
So in order to build up these loving relationships, he said, with all the counseling he did with couples, it wasn't so much about resolving conflicts in their relationships, but it was about restoring their love, getting them back to why they fell in love with each other and restoring the love. Not just saying, well, I love him, I love her, but actually feeling the love and being in love with one another. He said that each of us has a love bank, just like you deposit money in a savings account. Well, we have a love bank, and we need to make deposits in our love bank. And this is where we're positive and actively interested in the things that your spouse loves to do. So he actually says, now this may sound a little hard to do, but it's really good. If you can spend 15 hours a week doing mutually enjoyable activities that are healthy for the relationship, you can begin to build these positive, loving associations with your spouse. So we thought we would take just a minute here. If you're with your spouse, it's good to talk to your spouse, but talk to anybody. What are some of these things that you actually could do? It doesn't have to be, oh, we're going to go to the Bahamas on vacation, or we're going to have a trip and stop on every one of the continents. But they can be very simple things like, We could do gardening together. Ray said, we could wash dishes together.
That was a sacrifice.
But things that you can do together that'll be mutually enjoyable and healthy for the relationship. If you're both talking and having conversations while you're working together doing the dishes, that's a positive thing. So just talk to your spouse or talk to a partner, talk to someone.
No, wait just a second. Can I suggest something?
Sure.
Okay, so one of the saddest things is when someone's left out. You know, back in, you don't get chosen for the team or something like that. So if you don't have a partner, would you raise your hand, stand up, and go find another person? All you're going to do is talk about something you appreciate. It's
No,
very
this
easy.
was about finding things you could do together that would be...
Sorry.
Yeah.
Finding things, with this person that you meet? I don't get it.
Talking about positive things that if you're by yourself, things that you can enjoy where you could build positive relationships, even if it's with someone else, if it's not with your spouse. But with your spouse, talk about how you together as a unit could build positive associate relationships.
Okay, so raise your hand if you're not with someone and find a partner. And stand up and go find somebody to sit with them.
We need someone up here with Dana needs someone.
Keep your hand up if you don't have a partner yet.
Keith, you want to come with Dana? All right. All right. Or here. Yeah. All right, good. So go ahead and begin. Talk about what are those positive things you could do that would be healthy for the relationship. Oh, I love it. You just want to keep building positive relationships. You can think of all kinds of good things. That's a really good sign. So, I was going to have you play the outrageous game. You know, when you do this later when you get home, we're going to give you the assignment just to go home and play this with your spouse when you get home. You can play the outrageous game. So when one person says something, the other person, rather than putting it down or saying, oh, that's not going to work, just say outrageous. And each of you could offer things back and forth, like, Ray, we could do gardening together.
That's outrageous.
Now you offer something.
We could take a trip to Hawaii together.
Oh, that's outrageous.
We could do hula hooping together.
Oh, that's outrageous. So you don't put anything down. You just say outrageous and build, and you can get an amazing list going. So we're associative creatures who build up associative patterns. And if you can build up an association with your spouse of positive, loving things, it's going to support your relationship and fill up your love bank. If we begin to act in loving and romantic ways, we'll begin to feel loving and romantic. Now, doesn't this sound like something we know from the new church? Act precedes, willing follows. And most psychologists will say, even Dr. Phil says, new feelings follow new behaviors. So we begin to act in new ways, and the new feelings follow.
In fact, the way, but the way Dr. Phil says it, he says, and this is in his book, Relationship Rescue, he says, any psychologist will tell you that new feelings follow new behaviors. And so in the 1700s, Swedenborg said that as well. Act precedes, willing follows. And what actually happens is when you act in the way you want to be, the Lord changes the inside to match.
Yay. Thank you, Ray. So just notice how much time you are spending together doing these things and begin to build it up. Focus on building positive, loving associations with one another. In this one, it's about our relationship with the Lord, but it's about building our relationship with one another. One true God, one true love.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next commandment. You're going to love this one. This is about the name of the Lord. You shall not take the Lord's name in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. We know that the name of the Lord represents his qualities, his essence. And the essence of the Lord is love and wisdom, and then all the qualities that flow from that: understanding, compassion, forgiveness, discernment, resilience, and so many more. Now, we just talked about act precedes, willing follows. Sometimes we don't have the will. We know what's right. We know what we should do. We have all these marriage education principles and all these teachings from the writings. We don't want to do it. That's when we need to pray to the Lord to get those qualities into our life. So we access the Lord's qualities through prayer. call upon the name of the Lord.
Often it's the one we need right now in this moment. If we're finding we're in a conflict or we're in a confusion, whatever it is, that's the time to pray and say, Lord, please, fill me with your patience. Fill me with your understandings. Give me a little compassion here. And even the will to do it. So the Lord's right with us. He's only a prayer away.
Is there a psychologist that talks about this?
Yeah, there is, Ray. You want to hear about it?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
Yeah.
The one we'd like to focus on is Dr. Martin Seligman. He is the one who introduced this whole field of positive psychology. He said, we're not going to deal with mental illness, but we're going to deal with mental health. We're going to build on our strengths. He identified 6 categories that he said were the basic categories. They were love, wisdom, courage, justice, temperance, and transcendence. And then he took 24 different strengths. He called them signature strengths, and he divided them up into these different categories. They're basic virtues such as perseverance, gratitude, kindness, patience, courage, generosity. He called them signature strengths, but doesn't this sound like really names of the Lord? So if we see it not as signature, they're signature strengths, but we can call them names of the Lord. This is the Lord's qualities coming to us. Anyway, Martin Seligman had his students share stories about themselves that demonstrate a time in their lives when they exhibited one or more of these strengths. Now, he had just shared stories in their lives about when they exhibited one or more of these strengths. We say this is drawing on remains. All of this is rooted in the Lord's Word. He implants these things in us from time to time over our lives where he introduces these wonderful qualities and touches us with his qualities. And this is like stirring remains.
In a moment, we're going to ask you to turn to your spouse, or if you're not with your spouse right now, you can pair up with a partner and share a time in your life or in your childhood when you experienced one or more of these qualities. First, Star.
I've got an example.
Could you give us an example?
Sure.
Okay.
So when I was about 7 years old, our family moved to the country. We lived in Wisconsin, and we thought this was great. We bought a horse. So my parents were teaching us to ride a horse, and they had us, my father had us in a long lane. It was probably about the length of a football field. He put me on the horse on one end, and he said, okay, Star, just go and hold the reins, and when you want to get to the other side, you just pull back on the reins. So the horse started off, and all of a sudden a car went by, and the horse reared, and the horse took off. Full speed, straight ahead. I'm a little 7-year-old. I grabbed the saddle horn, screaming, and I hear my father say, Star, pull back on the reins, pull back on the reins. But there's no way, the reins are down there right now. I'm just holding on. And then I see my mother up ahead at the end of the lane, and she does this. And there's a horse charging at her, and she does this. And I saw the love and the courage in my mother, and I didn't want my mother to get hurt. So I reached down, picked up the reins, and pulled back on the reins, because the love and the courage in my mother then came into me and gave me the love and the courage to reach down. And I swear that story has stayed with me. When I get into difficult times, I know that the love and the courage can get me through. And now I know it's the Lord's love and courage that can bring me through.
Nice story, Star.
Ray, do you have a story?
I do. Glad you asked. Okay, so I'm 10 years old. My big brother and I are in the backyard. My brother's name is Jerry. He's 8 years older. Today, he's a pretty famous psychologist. He did well. Anyway, his psychology was starting real young. He wanted me to be a really good football player. And so in order to train me, he would take me in the backyard. He would take off his shoes. He put one shoe over there. I'll do it like this, just for a second. He put one shoe over here, and imagine that's the other shoe. He would get down on his knees and toss me the football. I'd be back maybe the second row there. And he'd say, okay, Raymond, charge the line. We call this buck the line. And I would run at him with the football, and if I had got past him, it would be a touchdown. But if he tackled me, it's not a touchdown. So I'd run at him, but if I hesitated even a little bit, he'd knock me down. But if I didn't hesitate, he would let me knock him over, and it felt so great. It knocked my big brother over. He was 8 years older. But he taught me to hit the line and not hesitate and to have determination. Don't go to the line, go through the line. This is my last year teaching at Bernathen College, and I'm determined to not go to the line, but go through the line. And I thank my brother for that, and I thank the Lord for giving me that quality of determination.
All right. So each of us has stories from childhood, and often we can really get all those negative stories going. But what we want to do is remember those good stories, the good stories we can tell. So we're going to talk to your spouse or your partner who you've been paired up with, and just each of you has an opportunity to take just a minute or a minute and a half to share a story, something about when the Lord's qualities came to you or came into your life and you experienced them. You may begin. All right, thank you. Getting back and touching this is our remains. This is how the Lord is really working with us in our lives. It's important to remember these stories, to share them with one another, and to share them with our children. One anniversary, Ray and I took journals to the Delaware River and sat at a bench by the Delaware River and just wrote all that we could remember about childhood remains and stories from childhood that maybe we hadn't thought of for years and years and years. And then we spent time sharing our stories with one another. And we were weeping about getting to know one another in these very deep ways with stories that were so meaningful for us. So that was a way of really developing positive association. So keep these stories present in your lives and present in your marriage and present with your children.
I just want to say that this is in no way denying all of the bad things that happened, but it's focusing on the good, focusing on those moments when the Lord was in our life. So important. Jesus says, "Ask and it shall be given to you. Seek and you shall find. Do not take the Lord's name in vain. Pray." So the next commandment we come to is remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. This is the commandment where we're really to read and meditate on sacred scripture. We listen for the Lord speaking to us in our lives. We quiet our proprium so the Lord's will can become active in us. We listen deeply to the Lord. Well, if we take this into our marriage relationship, this is the commandment that asks us to really listen deeply to our spouse and learn. We don't all really know how to listen. You don't grow up always learning how to listen. And sometimes we need a little bit of instruction in learning how to listen. So most of the marriage education programs have some form of communication skills. They call it couple communication, couple sharing, speaker-listener technique, active listening. The one we'd like to focus on today is from Harville Hendrix and Helen LaKelly Hunt, called Couples Dialogue. And you use this when one or the other really feels misunderstood, like, I have this feeling about something and you're not getting it. And the other says, sure, I know what you're talking about. That's a conflict, that's a stop, that's a break. So I have to say, can we just do a deep listening? And when this happens, remember that this is holy ground, it's a Sabbath, you take the shoes from off your feet. It's just going to be about sharing what I'm feeling. It's not about resolving the issue, not getting into the details of the issue, but just, this is what I'm feeling about it. And the person who really has that needs to communicate it. The other person, you do it without attacking. The other person, which would be the listener, needs to just be able to listen and not become defensive. So the speaker communicates in short chunks using I statements about their feelings, not the issue. Then the listener mirrors what they heard. They say, did I get it? Is there more?
And then the speaker would be able to say, yes, you got it, or no, you didn't get it, or yes, there's more, and then be able to say a little bit more. And this goes on back and forth until finally the listener would say.
Then the listener summarizes, saying, what I heard you say is. Then the listener validates, saying, it makes sense to me that you would think, or I can see that. And
see, that's associated with our mind, our thinking. First, he summarizes the story and then validates what they're thinking.
This is almost like natural, spiritual, celestial, because the third one is empathize. It must have been whatever it is. It must, I can imagine that you must feel whatever it is. It must have hurt when whatever it is. And so,
And that's about of our feelings of
yeah,
our heart.
summarizing, validating, empathizing, 3 levels.
And then the speaker can say, yes, I really feel understood. And that's when you know that you've grown another level in your relationship.
Now, when you're having this dialogue, you can have a dual consciousness. You can be listening very deeply to what your spouse says, but at the same time, if you have removed your ego, the Lord is filling you with loving emotions and noble thoughts, and maybe an idea or a hunch about your relationship. And you can just say, well, I'm getting this thought, and you can just try that out, because the Lord is leading you, and you're listening to the Lord, and you're listening to your spouse. It's a beautiful thing. So this is all about take the shoes from off your feet, meaning be sensitive. Be sensitive to one another. Listen deeply. This is holy ground. This is the Sabbath.
Okay, so this brings us to the next commandment, which is honor your father and mother, that your days may be long upon the land that the Lord your God is giving you. This is that commandment with a promise. If our days are long, if we're really honoring our parents, we're seeing them or re-seeing them through the eyes of compassion and understanding, our days will be long. That means the sun will be shining. We'll be feeling the Lord's love and the Lord's wisdom coming through from that. Did I just drop something? I felt like I went mute for a minute. Okay, I guess I'm fine. So where was I?
Sunshine is the Lord's love.
The sunshine, the Lord's love, the Lord's wisdom is coming to us, and those dark times of the cold and the falsity, that's quiet. Those days are that part of that state of our lives is quieter. So our days will be long. So this is the commandment about gratitude. We're to appreciate our parents' good qualities and see the grateful gifts that we've received directly or indirectly from them. These are how we can tell the stories again about our parents. In our relationships, in our marriage relationships, we want to talk about what we call appreciation. We gave it, what's it called?
You're it.
TAG. T-A-G, TAG, thanksgiving, appreciation, and gratitude. If we can fill our marriages with thanksgiving, appreciation, and gratitude, it will be a boost for our marriages. Researchers are well aware of the importance of gratitude as a foundation for mental health. Robert Emmons was one of the early leaders in the field of gratitude research. His book, Thanks, How the New Science of Gratitude Can Make You Happier, actually built on the research of another psychologist, Barbara Fredrickson. She said, our brains are wired to prevent the emotional confusion that would result in the activation of opposite emotional states. What this means is we can't be happy and sad at the same time. We can't feel resentment and gratitude at the same time. We can only feel one thing at a time.
So as an experiment, Emmons had 3 groups of people, and they were given pre-tests about their general level of happiness, how they felt about themselves, how they felt about others, and how they felt about the world in general. So he had a base there of where they were in terms of general satisfaction. And then he had the first group keep gratitude journals, gratitude for anything that happened during the day, you know. Oh, excuse me. The first group was the Hassle group. Hassle, H-A-S-S-L-E, Hassle group. They were supposed to keep journals of everything that went wrong, like, they ran out of toothpaste, or they got held up in traffic. Then the second group was the gratitude group. They were writing down any little thing they were thankful for. The sun came up, they were breathing, whatever it was. They saw some pretty flowers, someone was nice to them. And then the third group, they were given no specific instructions aside from just keep a journal. The results were that the gratitude group had a 25% increase in their level of happiness compared to where they started. Emmons, they were happier, healthier, more alert, more optimistic than any of the control groups. Emmons concluded that gratitude protects us from envy, greed, resentment, and bitterness. Neuroscience now tells us that gratitude actually changes the brain. So this means that it is of vital importance to practice gratitude and appreciation in our marriages.
Something else that they found, that when you keep a gratitude journal or focus on gratitude, even if you're doing a gratitude journal for as little as 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the effects can last for 6 months. It actually does begin to change our brains. So think about this. Something as simple as just gratitude, appreciation, thanking your spouse for things, making this part of your behavior that is a regular go-to can really increase your relationship with happiness.
So take a minute to appreciate your partner. If your partner's not here, talk to someone about something you appreciate. Just a quick one, just a minute.
If it's your partner, you might say something you appreciate about them. So go ahead and just do some appreciation.
I really love how well you're doing. You're doing a great job today.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Okay.
Thank you for appreciating one another. Doesn't it feel good just to appreciate and think about the things you appreciate? It does really lift our spirits, and it does change our brains.
So now that we've got you all warmed up and feeling very fuzzy about each other, we'll introduce the next commandment. It's called, anybody know? Do not murder.
Isn't it amazing? It's like the Lord giving us divine humor. He says, I'm going to make you feel so good about appreciating, and then I'm going to tell you, don't murder. Oh, okay, this is exactly where we need to hear this one.
So this commandment is going to be about the power of words. When Jesus deepened this commandment, he took it beyond the literal level. He said, you have heard of old, you shall not murder. But I say unto you, whoever calls his brother worthless is in danger of the council, and whoever calls his brother a fool is in danger of hellfire. Therefore, for this commandment, we're going to ask you to watch the words that come out of your mouth, including the tone. During our 10 commandments, oh, it was a nice tone. What was that? Was that a baby I heard? Oh, so sweet. Okay, during our 10 Commandments course, we ask people to watch the words that come out of their mouth. Some of you have maybe done this for a week. You say nothing critical to or about anyone. Instead, let your words be kind, true, and useful. How many of you have done this? Yeah, okay.
It's not always easy to do when you're really being aware of it. You have to build this practice.
Rabbi Joseph Telushkin, who lectures on the ethics of speech, in one speech said, if you can't go 24 hours without liquor, you're addicted to alcohol. And if you can't go 24 hours without smoking, you're addicted to nicotine. And if you can't go 24 hours without saying unkind words to or about anyone, you have lost control of your tongue. Well, in psychology, the definition of addiction is any substance or behavior that controls you and you don't control it. In your marriages or in your relationships, if complaining and criticizing is your automatic response, you have lost control of your tongue.
Now, the psychologist John Gottman, and we're going to talk more about him later, calls complaining and criticizing a harsh startup, and says if you start your conversations with complaining and criticizing, there's a 96% chance it will not end well. That makes sense.
To put this in religious terms, an evil tree cannot bear good fruit.
Yeah, thank you. Now, if we justify our criticism and our complaining and criticism and say, well, this is just the way I am, this is called a fixed mindset. Whenever we say, well, this is just the way I am, get used to it, this is called a fixed mindset. This term was coined by Carol Dweck. She researched the importance, or actually gave these terms, the importance of having a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. She did extensive research with young students over a longitudinal study and found that those who succeeded in life had a growth mindset. They were willing to learn. They believed that they could change, and they had success in life. Now, I've got a little story here. Do any of you know Bram Genslinger? He's about 37 years old. Yes. Well, he's he was my youngest son's really good friend. And one day I was at the school with him, and we were walking down the hall. I was with Brahm and Shiloh and me, and we were walking down the hall. And I said, I knew he was musical and could play some instruments. And I said, hey, Brahm, how many instruments can you play? And he says, oh, I can play hundreds. I just haven't learned them all yet. That's a growth mindset. That's a growth mindset. So wherever we are, if we know, I just haven't learned it yet. But I can learn, I can grow. That's the kind of mindset we want to have in our marriages. We're not stuck into, oh, this is the way I am. No, we're learning, we're growing. Our marriages are organic. We also need this growth mindset in our marriage. We need to believe that we can change and grow, especially in our marriage. If we say, this is the way I am, and my father was this way too, this doesn't work. We want to put that behind us. We want to say, I can grow, I can change.
So, should I tell them about my truck?
Oh, this is a good one.
Okay, is Peter Rhodes here?
Oh, Peter should stand. I want to take a bow. I want to come kiss you, Peter.
Wait a minute.
Oh.
Just you stay right here. Okay.
Peter
Okay.
gave this wonderful message to Ray many years ago. You can tell about
Peter
it.
and Roxanne and Star and I were with Glenn and Cheryl Bostock in their back when they had a retreat on the St. Lawrence River in Canada. And so we were all talking, and I overheard Peter say something. He said this, what thoughts, attitudes, and behaviors can I change in myself to make my wife's experience of being with me a little better? When I heard that, I thought, oh my, I need that. So I wrote it down quickly, I printed it out, and for like 10 or 12 years now, it's been on the dashboard of my car. I see it every single day. And I think, what thoughts, attitudes, and behaviors can I change in myself to make my wife's experience of being with me a little better? Is it working?
It's working. It really is wonderful.
Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Pete.
Let's hear it for Pete.
So we all can change. Rather than a harsh startup with criticism and complaint, I can learn a soft startup. I don't have to go to complaint and criticism. I can learn a new behavior. I can learn a new response. I can change. I can ask the Lord, Lord, really help me to change and to work on this. Help me be mindful.
So we said that we were going to talk about various psychological programs and perspectives. One that was very famous a while back was PrEP, P-R-E-P, Prevention and Relationship Enhancement Program by Howard Markman, Scott Stanley, and Susan Blumberg. They wrote a book called Fighting for Our Marriage. Not fighting in our marriage, or not fair fighting, but fighting for our marriage. And here's a quote from the book. Many people believe that differences and disagreements are the cause of problems in their marriage. But 25 years of research shows us that success in marriage is related not so much to the differences between two partners, but how the partners handle those differences and disagreements.
So in our own lives, when we got into conflict, we were using three basic rules of conflict, creative conflict resolution. And the first was compromise, where you each give in a little bit and you come up with something else. Or you give a gift. Maybe this time, okay, Ray, we'll do it your way. And next time he would say, okay, Star, we'll do it your way. Or we just decided to disagree. But those didn't always work for us. So we decided we would sit down and brainstorm some other ideas for creating conflict. And we came up with a list of 14 different ways that we could go-tos for us whenever conflict came up in our relationship. And the first one that came up, what we want to talk about, was outrageous. We talked about outrageous before. When you do your brainstorming, just say outrageous. This actually came from a book we read called A Whack on the Side of the Head, and it was about how businesses can creatively come through conflict when they have conflict in their businesses. If there's something going on there that they need to get the group together and work through, rather than people being on one another, they would get all their researchers together, and one person would say, okay, oh, it actually happened with a paint company. They give the example of this paint company developed a paint that was supposed to be easy on, easy off, but it wasn't working well. So they got all their researchers together and say, okay, we're going to play this outrageous game. One person can say an idea of what we could do with this, and all anybody else had to say was outrageous, and then they would offer something. And this went around the room till all these researchers were going, well, let's try this. Outrageous. Well, let's try this. Outrageous. And you know what they came up with? The sticky stuff on Post-it notes.
Outrageous.
Outrageous. Outrageous.
Outrageous.
So for something that was a failure, they turned it into a huge success just by being outrageous and not knocking down ideas.
Sometimes if we're having a conflict and a disagreement, we might decide to do it in a Southern dialect.
Now, I knew the Southern dialects because my daddy was from Tennessee, and even though I was living in Wisconsin, I could still go into a Southern dialect. Now, I got to tell you, those people that live in Wisconsin have a dialect all their own.
And startedly, when you're talking in that Southern dialect, I can't help but love you.
And you know what else? I can't help but love you, too. It's really hard to fight when you're in a Southern dialect. We just take those hells and we just give them the tar and put them in the briar patch.
Yep, and we got a brand new one this morning, too. We learned from Robin and Graham, we could resolve our conflicts like this.
Ray, I have a conflict with you.
And Star, I have a conflict with you.
What are we going to do about this
I
now?
don't know.
Maybe we could sing about it.
We'll work this through.
We'll work it through. We will never let this get us down.
All right, so you can do this stuff. It actually works.
And you know what's really funny is that we really did do Southern dialects while our kids were growing up. And one of our daughters came to us and sent us this thing that says, look, someone suggested this on TikTok.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So now it's getting out there and we think, yeah, it's good.
Okay,
so just go to another dialect. It actually gets you into another part of the brain so you don't go down those same ruts that you've been in before. You just want to get out of your ruts.
Ja, das stimmt, du bist richtig.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
good.
okay, yeah. Okay, so now here, this one we call Silverman and Silverman Psychological Services.
You remember this one, Serena? Spring? Some of our daughters are here. Well, we had 7 kids. Now, when they were 7 teenagers all at the same time, that was pretty wild. But before they all got to be teenagers, Serena and Sasha were already young teenagers. And when we had a problem, we would go to Silverman and Silverman Psychological Service. This was our 2 oldest daughters, Serena and Sasha. And they would say, okay, Mom, you lay on this sofa, and Pop, you lay on this sofa. And they would take out their pad and pencil, and they'd say, okay, Mom, what's your problem? And I'd tell my problem, and they'd write it down. They'd go to Pop, and they'd say, okay, Pop, what's your problem? And they'd write it down. And then they say, okay, we've got the answer for you. And they would tell us how to resolve our problems. And it's amazing. We let them in. Our kids knew that we had conflicts growing up, but that we could always work through them, and there were creative ways of working through them. We didn't have to disguise them or hide them, but we could say, we need your help with this. And they actually would come up with some pretty good ideas. You know, kids can be pretty astute at what's happening in their parents' relationships.
For example, I remember one very vividly. After Serena and Sasha had, listened to us carefully, Serena came over to me and said, Pop, the problem is you need to rise above it.
They were great. And actually Sasha's now a therapist and has her own practice, and she's really good at listening and answering good questions. And I kind of wonder if there was a start way back then. But anyway, we're really great for Silverman and Silverman Psychological Services. Another one that we used, this is one that...
This is our big one. This is our big one.
Can I do the little one first?
The little one?
Yeah,
we'll start with the little one.
All right.
Okay, right.
The little one is called ouch. If I ever got hurt by something Ray would say, rather than let it go in my head or turn around or feel distant from him, I would just simply say, ouch.
And that would be a signal to me that maybe I said something not in the right way or not at the right time.
Or even unintentionally.
Or, I could say, I'm so sorry, and just maybe take it over, which leads to our...
The instant replay. Now,
Yes.
this is the one that we use so often
If
in
you're
our
taking
marriage.
notes, write this one down.
Now, this is back in the day when we'd be watching a football game. They just introduced the instant replay, where they would go back and take the play and do it over again so that you could see it. there was a time when there wasn't an instant replay, but we remember when there was the instant replay, when it became a thing. And we looked at each other and we said, wow, we can use this in our marriage.
Yes.
So what we did was, if we were ever in a conflict where it wasn't going well and we both knew it, we made agreement, we shook hands on it, and we said, if one of us calls for an instant replay, the other one has to agree to do it.
Has to.
Has to.
Yeah.
And
Usually, one person wants to do it or is willing to do it, and the other person doesn't want to do it, but has to.
You have to do it.
Right.
So we had that agreement. And if we ever found ourselves in a disagreement and we were into something or it wasn't going well, one of us would say, I call for an instant replay. And the other would say, okay. So we'd leave the room, we go out of the room, and we take a minute and just calm ourselves or count to 10, or we'd say a prayer and say, Lord, help me go back into this. Be with me as I have this conversation. And then we turn around and go back to the conversation, but this time on a different level of consciousness because we were closer to the Lord. We were really praying for the Lord to be in this. And it's amazing. We did soft startups. We were able to listen to one another, and we resolved things so quickly. So this was our go-to. But we had a lot of kids running around, so there was a lot of things happening in our household. So we found ourselves in this needing this instant replay quite a bit. It's funny, as we've gotten older and there's just the two of us, life's gotten a lot easier. But we still want to use that if it comes up. And a part of coming back together and having conversation was letting our words be kind, true, and useful.
Now, I just want to say about the instant replay, actually, the instant replay is just the same thing over again. So we changed the language around that. We call it a do-over. And anybody golf in here? Any golfers? You can call us a mulligan. Just take a mulligan. So it works that way. David and Vera Mace, back in 1986, said, never waste a good conflict. Never waste a good conflict. I love that. Use it to...
Isn't that encouraging? Yeah, never waste a good conflict.
Yeah, okay, we got a conflict. Use it to learn more about yourself, your spouse, and your relationship. Every conflict is an opportunity to grow. We're not here to murder one another, rather to love and uplift one another. We need to be aware of the words we speak to or about our spouse. Do not murder. Be life givers to one another.
Yay, yay. Okay, so this brings us to the next commandment, which is, do not commit adultery. Honor your marriage. Now, the definition of adultery is sexual intimacy outside of the marriage relationship. And you might say, well, why? Why do people have affairs? And the main reason is that because they have unmet needs, and they're trying to get them met outside of the marriage relationship. Human needs psychology was pioneered by Abraham Maslow. And we've discovered that human needs psychology goes through every program. Maslow developed this hierarchy of needs. You remember his little triangle here? That we had to have our lower needs met before we could get to self-actualization. Well, there's a couple called Chloe Madanes and Tony Robbins who have reworked these and called them 6 human needs. And it's not necessarily a hierarchy, but they're all these needs are present with us all at any given time in our lives. Maybe at one time in our life, one need was more pressing, and another time, another need was more pressing. But they're important to know about, and they're important to know about which of these needs are pressing in our spouse so that we can help to satisfy their need.
And, which is a major need for them and what need is up at the moment.
Yeah.
So we'll briefly go through each of the 6. The first need is certainty. This is safety, security. In our relationship, it's my spouse is reliable, dependable, and trustworthy. That meets a certainty need.
But you can't just have certainty all the time or things get kind of boring. So you have to liven it up a little bit. So we all have need for variety and uncertainty. And these are the little things like getting flowers or calling someone during the day and say, I was just thinking about you, or planning some activity together. Say, hey, we haven't had time together for a while. How about if we have a date night? So it's doing something that you not necessarily normally would do, bringing variety into your marriage.
The third human need is a need for significance. Everyone needs to feel that in some way they're special, unique, important. You're number one in my life. No one will ever match you or compare to you. I love you forever.
Oh, that feels so good to hear.
That was true.
It really feels so good just to hear that. Oh, so being significant is really important.
Next human need is the need for love and connection.
Yeah.
Of course, that's one of the reasons we got married or being drawn into marriage. We have this need implanted by God to be in connection, to love one another. The next human need is a need for growth. We need to grow intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. This is a theme that keeps coming up, through all the psychologists, the need to keep growing. And the final need is the need for contribution.
We are born to be of use. Now, doesn't that sort of resonate with our religion? We're really born for use. We're really born to contribute. We're really born for others. So if we're focusing on getting our needs met, sometimes we can get our needs met by just contributing to others. So being of use to others is a great way of fulfilling one of these great human needs. Now, we can get these needs. Sorry, I'm not supposed to do that. I'm working on that one. I don't want to do that thing with my mouth when I get words mixed up, so I want to do an instant replay.
Oh. That's good.
So,
she's growing before our very eyes. Let's hear from my wife. Yes.
I am working on that. At least I'm aware of it. Okay. So we get these needs met in either healthy or unhealthy ways. And it's not just, we don't get into a relationship just to get our own needs met. I'm not going into this being very needy so that this person can fill my needs. That doesn't work too well in a relationship, but we have to be there. I need to know what Ray's needs are, so he needs to communicate if he needs to spend more time with me or if he needs to have a little more significance. Or if he could tell me those things, that gives me a cue of how I can help him fill his needs. And he can do the same for me, and we can do that for one another. When we're doing that for one another, Scott Stanley says this is the paradox of sacrifice. It happens in all good marriages, where we're not thinking about ourselves, but we're thinking about our spouse and how we can make them happy.
And here's a big line from Robbins and Madanes. These needs say Robbins and Madanes. By the way, they're not a couple. They're two people who work together. Tony Robbins, famous motivational speaker. Chloe Madanes, famous psychologist. They work together to produce this 6 human needs. They say that these needs are so strong that they can trump values, even the value of remaining true to a wedding vow. This is what ordinarily motivates people to seek a divorce. The desire to fulfill unmet needs. That's why it's important to share our needs with one another and meet our needs within the marriage relationship. So there's lots of other programs out there that are really helpful for this. For example, Gary Chapman's 5 Languages of Love. I'm sure, how many people know Gary Chapman's 5 Languages of Love?
Yay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we don't have to go into that too deeply, but words of affirmation, quality time, physical touch, acts of service, and gifts. These are all up for people at various times. Star, what's my language of love?
Oh, I know your language of love. Acts of service.
That's right.
Ray doesn't like cards or gifts or anything when he has a birthday, right? He likes a work day. Okay, can everybody come over and do a work day for me? When the family comes over and does a work day for him, he feels so loved. That's his love language.
Can I guess yours?
Yes.
I think yours is, let's see, I would say quality time.
Yeah, I like quality time. I like spending time with conversation or doing something with someone that really fills my love language.
So anyway, those are the love languages, but you want to talk about his other book and his other program?
Yes, after doing all this with the love languages, he said, this is really interesting. He had some people coming to him that couldn't resolve their conflict. There were a couple of women who were really good friends, and one of them said, I did something and I shouldn't have done it, but I told my friend that I was sorry, but she just won't let it go. And he talked to this other woman. He said, well, what's going on here? Why? She said she was sorry. She said, but she didn't ask me for forgiveness. And he realized, oh, for some people, just saying you're sorry doesn't mean they've apologized. So people have different languages of apology, just like you have a different language of love. So he puts these in 5 different categories. You can express regret. You can say, I'm really sorry about that. But some people need more. Maybe they need to feel that you accept the responsibility and say, I was wrong. That was really inconsiderate of me to do that. See how that kind of feels a little different? Another one is to make restitution, saying, how can I fix this? I'm sorry, I was wrong. How can I fix this? I forgot our meeting. It went completely out of my mind. Can we set a date for tomorrow and I will be sure to be there? How can I fix this? Another is to genuinely repent. They need to know that you genuinely repent. I'm sorry, I won't do this again. I will really remember, I won't do this again. Another one is to request forgiveness. I'm really sorry, will you forgive me?
In the context of this commandment, forgiveness is central. Forgive us our debts as we also forgive our debtors.
No, this is not committing adultery.
Well, it is. I'll
but
explain.
you did. Ray slipped into the Lord's Prayer. This is what is the parallel in the Lord's Prayer. Forgive us our debts. Oh, yeah.
So a definition of adultery is making what is pure impure. And we all start off with such great hopes and such a pure love for one another. But over time, things happen and resentments build up and grudges build up and bitterness comes in. And we want to clean that out. We want to clean up those messes. We want to get back to an unpolluted, pure relationship once again. We don't want to commit adultery by adulterating what God has given us that's so pure. So the way to do it is to practice forgiveness. Practice forgiveness in your relationship. Honor marriage.
Yay. Okay.
All right. The commandments are going to go deeper and deeper here. We're going into do not steal. And we're going to line this up with respecting each other. And you'll see the connection in a moment. Do not take what is, the definition of not stealing is do not take what is not your own. And that could include objects or taking the credit for something that's someone else's, like their ideas, or plagiarizing. In the highest sense, stealing is taking credit for the loving emotions you feel and the noble thoughts you think, and taking that credit that belongs to God and attributing it to yourself. In the Garden of Eden, the first theft in the Bible is recorded. God said, do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And they did. What is eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? It's basically thinking you know. And in the writing is this, the pride of self-intelligence. Thinking you know, especially thinking you know better than others or better than your spouse. There's a word for this, it's called contempt. It's a sense of superiority. It's the belief that you know more and are better than others.
Now, according to John Gottman, contempt is one of the 4 behaviors that show up in a marriage relationship that is doomed and headed for divorce. John Gottman calls these 4 different behaviors the Four Horsemen. Maybe some of you have heard about these 4 horsemen. We want to beware of these 4 horsemen. The first is criticism, when you're really attacking someone's character. But criticism can slide into contempt, where you really look down on the other person. And then another of the ones we want to avoid is defensiveness. When someone has brought you something, you want to keep defending it, and defensive comes up. And that's really making the other person wrong. And then the 4th one is stonewalling. And this is refusing to speak to the other person, just walking out of the room, giving the silent treatment, or giving the cold shoulder. I was practicing this one in front of the mirror for this.
I like that
I'll
one.
give you the cold shoulder. I didn't really do that one, but I thought that was kind of fun.
Yes.
Okay, I shouldn't practice it even. But anyway, criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. These are the ones you want to watch out for and just really, really ask the Lord to come in so you don't have these in your relationship. Gottman has a research institute in Washington State called the Love Lab. And he has couples come, and he wires them so that he gets their heart rate, some of the brain stuff, the blood pressure, skin response. And after listening to couples interact for 15 minutes, Gottman can predict with a 91% accuracy whether their marriage would eventually fail or succeed. Wow. And he said contempt was the major factor.
Thinking that you know better. Now, the couples who succeeded in their marriage exhibited other kinds of behavior traits. One was they responded to what Gottman calls bids. Hey, Star, I had an interesting thing happen.
Oh, really? Can you tell me about it?
Yeah, see, she's interested and she's turning to me. She's not stuck on her phone or whatever it is. Responding.
Or ask me that one again.
Star, a really interesting thing happened to me. Star?
Yeah, what was it?
Star?
Yeah, I'm listening.
Come on, honey, I need to tell you something.
Oh, no, right now.
Okay, that's called not responding to a bid.
Okay.
Okay, so they
So
turn
let's
to...
do responding to a bid. We'll reprogram them again. Okay. No, you're gonna give me a bid.
Oh, okay. Hey, Star, I got something really interesting to tell you.
Oh, really? I'm excited. What is it?
Oh, well, really?
Okay.
Okay.
So really turning toward the person, being interested in what they're going to say, that's responding to bids.
So we respond to bids, turn toward each other, had soft startups, not harsh startups. They had positive sentiment override. This is such a big one. In positive sentiment override, they had loving positive associations. And these loving positive associations were built up over time.
Over time.
Right.
We look through the eyes of love. We have positive sentiment override.
Oh, Spring, you want to get that picture? Okay. Here you go. Okay. All right. So we have an example of how this works in our life just yesterday.
So when Ray was going off to work and he walked down the driveway, I said, "Bye, Ray. Have fun. Drive carefully."
Now, drive carefully. If I have negative sentiment override, what am I thinking? Drive carefully. Does she think I can't drive well? Is she like attacking my masculinity? I can drive. Oh, I'm drive carefully. But if I'm looking through the eyes of love, I'm thinking, she really loves me. She really cares for me. She doesn't want me to get into an accident, maybe black eyes. Thank you so much for
Thank you. That was really nice.
You're welcome.
Thank
Okay. Anyway, that's real life right there that just happened. Okay. So the other thing that Gottman emphasizes is that the husband has emotional intelligence. He's assuming that the women all have emotional intelligence. But the men have emotional intelligence, meaning that they are willing to share power and, get this one now, be influenced by their wife.
I love that.
I thought you would. In the new church, we would say that the husband was not in the pride of self-intelligence, and the couple respect and admire each other. So to sum this one up, we would just say, do not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Don't be a know-it-all. Don't think you know. Give credit to God and be influenced by your spouse. Do not steal.
So this brings us to the commandment, which is, do not bear false witness, tell the truth. You see how these commandments are beautifully written. Every time I go through them, I see they're in this perfect order that takes us from the Lord into our parents, our neighbor, and then further and further into more internal states within us. At the very literal level, this is about the basic lies we tell others. Now, what are some of these lies? They could take the form of not just lying, but maybe embellishing something. You ever embellish it a little bit and add some more details? Exaggerating. Maybe you like to leave some details out, and that's called omission. Maybe it's not keeping your word. You made a promise to do something, but you didn't follow through. Maybe it was about spreading rumors, because you really don't know the whole story, but you just heard something and you want to be able to spread that. Now, we're living in a world of fake news and misinformation, and that seems to be kind of like the normal thing. So we really don't know what's true. But this commandment asks us not to bear false witness, not to tell defensive lies. Oh, I was tied up in traffic, and really, you were on your computer too long. Or, my dog ate my homework.
Classic.
That's the classic. So why do we do this? Why do we tell these lies?
One explanation is given by the psychologist Rick Hansen in his book, Buddha's Brain, The Practical Neuroscience of Happiness, Love, and Wisdom. He talks about a phrase he calls evolutionary defensiveness. This is also called the negativity bias. And the assumption here, or the theory here, is that we all come from way back. Our brains are kind of wired for defense. There was a time in all of our lives, the lives of our ancestors, where they had to be so careful. There could be a saber-toothed tiger behind that bush, an enemy tribe over that hill. You didn't have time to stop and smell the flowers. You had to be on guard. You had to be aware. You had to be defensive. And so we developed a defensive mindset or a negative bias. And it's sort of like the good stuff is like Teflon, right out. And the bad stuff is like Velcro.
This is like, we have different parts of our brain, and one is the amygdala, the fight, flight, or freeze. That's our old brain, and we've evolved from that. We have a rational ability to think now, but if we're not using that and we go to this amygdala, we can get into trouble. We can be on the lookout for what's wrong, only because we want to protect ourselves. But this negativity bias leads us into false perceptions of reality. In the field of psychology called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, these false perceptions are called cognitive distortions. And we'd like to tell you a few how these cognitive distortions can show up in our relationships.
So we're going to give you a short list of cognitive distortions. This is the area where psychology is just full of information and practice. Overgeneralizations. For example, you always and you never. You're familiar with that one. This is another form of false witness.
How often do we go to that? Well, you always do this, or you never come home on time. That's the field of overgeneralizations. Now, there's another one, catastrophizing. This is exaggerating the significance of something. For example, if Ray forgot our anniversary, if I were catastrophizing, I would say, this means you don't love me. Our marriage is over. So you take something, he forgot our anniversary, and I make it mean he doesn't love me anymore. So that's catastrophizing.
There's another one called mental filtering. And this is when you dwell on a single negative detail. For example, we've been on a great vacation. We had a wonderful time, all kinds of great experiences. But when we get home, we realize that well, let's not say we. Oh, sorry, should we say we?
Well,
this
we made this one up, but I'll just act it out
actually,
anyway.
this is real. I forgot to pack the iPhone charger, left it plugged in.
So I can't talk about anything that happened on the weekend except that he forgot to bring the iPhone charger.
That's called mental filtering.
All right. Another one is tunnel vision. And this is if you're looking for something bad in your partner, you're going to find it. So what you look for will show up.
Another one is mind reading. I know what you're thinking, and it's usually followed by an accusation.
And another one is taking things personally, being so sensitive that you get hurt by things. Now, for me, this was a big one for me early in our relationship. I was more sensitive then and would take things more personally. And particularly in this one area where my brain goes back and forth very quickly, and I could take two words and put them together to create a new word. Or I could take two phrases and put them together and mix them up. So like we're getting ready to present this or getting our material ready, and I can say to Ray, I want to prepare a little more. I just don't want to do this off the hip.
And I laughed. I thought that was so funny. I always laugh when she comes up with these. They're called malaphors or malapropisms. If two words change.
Do you know what I put together? Yeah. Off the cuffs and shooting from the hip. but you don't do it off the hip. But early in our marriage, I would do these often, and Ray would laugh, and I thought he was laughing at me, and I felt bad about it, and I thought that meant I was stupid. But actually, over time...
No, I thought she was brilliant. She'd come up with these wonderful things. I wanted to write a book called Thus Spoke Star.
So I still do this, but now it's funny. It's really funny. When I do one and Ray laughs, I go, what did I mix up? And he's a word master. He'll tell me what I mixed up and put it back together, and we can both have a good time with it. So I've really changed my brain. So I've got new associative angels that are with me when I do this, and they're really having a fun time laughing along with it too when I do this. So you can change your brain, you can have a growth mindset, you can consciously choose a new response. Like I said, you'll be in a different spiritual society, so just really have fun with this.
So several years ago, on the recommendation of a friend, we took a program called Landmark Forum. Any Landmark Forum folks in here? Okay, well then you know one of the distinctions that's made in the Landmark Forum is the distinction between what happened and your story about what happened. Kind of like Joe Friday back in Dragnet days, just the facts, ma'am, just what happened. We can give you an illustration of this. We're meaning-making machines, and the mind hates a vacuum, so it kind of fills it with whatever it can, and usually not so good. So
yesterday, Ray sent me a voicemail, and when I opened it up, I just looked at the transcription. I just read the transcription. The transcription said, from Ray, "Hi, Sarah, I love you so much. Bye."
Oh, no.
Time to put on my love glasses. Now, rather than think that Ray was actually sent this to the wrong person, and actually there was a Sarah out there that he really loved, I can put this on and just laugh and say, I love Ray so much. This is just Siri mixing up my name and not getting it right.
That's positive sentiment override.
Positive sentiment
Thank
override,
God, right.
Looking through the eyes of love, putting the best interpretation on it.
So when these false messages come in, the Word teaches us how to refute the false messages. And in the highest sense, it's the Word of God. You all know the story of Jesus was tempted.
Excuse me, Ray. May I talk about the case building and the basement boys first?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to back up just a little bit here, because I also want to get the message in that when these false messages come to us, when we think we really know, when we've done any of these distortions of reality, usually it's the hells flowing in, and they're building their case. These are the head bullies, or the basement boys. You can call them whatever you want. You can call them evil spirits. They really want to take us into negative territory. And they'll provide all kinds of rationalizations and justifications and negative messages. But we don't want to go there. Instead, when you have some of these come up, the solution is just to turn to your partner and say, I'm confused here. What did you mean by that? So rather than us fill it up with all of our imaginings, we just say, I'm confused by that. What did you mean by that? And it gives them an opportunity to tell you what's really true.
Star, that was really lovely.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. No, I'm glad, because I just rushed past that, and I should not have.
Well, I just
So
thought
important.
it was important to...
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Really great. Which leads us to the point I was making. How can we refute these false witnesses? And the great example is Jesus in the desert, confronted by the devil, who's pouring in false witness after false witness. Well, if you're the Son of God, turn these stones to bread. Jesus says, remember, it is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. And the devil tries again. Well, cast yourself down from this tower. Again, Jesus says, it is written. You shall not tempt the Lord your God. And finally, the devil, a third time, takes him up on a big mountain, on top of a tall mountain, and says, I will give you all the kingdoms of the world and their glory if you will fall down and worship me. And Jesus once again says, it is written, you shall worship the Lord alone. You shall worship the Lord, and him only shall you serve. Whoa, it took him right back to the first commandment. So when we refute these false witnesses, we can conquer. In summary, refuse to believe false witnesses. See the higher truth about each other Jesus said, I have come to open blind eyes.
And this brings us to the next commandment, which is the 9th and 10th one are both about coveting. These are our coveting commandments. We call it, do not covet, rise above it. And the rise above it doesn't mean get rid of it, don't dwell on it. It means take yourself to a higher level. Take yourself to an understanding where the Lord dwells. Put yourself back in connection with the Lord. So do not covet your neighbor's house. This is about an inordinate desire to possess things, whether they're material possessions or wanting to have circumstances go our way. This is our neighbor's house. Our neighbor's wife, do not covet your neighbor's wife, manservant, maidservant, ox or ass, or anything that is your neighbor's refers to an inordinate desire to control. The wife is what others think. The manservant
love, whatever is love.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you.
It's okay.
The wife is what others love. The manservant is what others think. The maidservant is what others feel. And the ox and the donkey are what others do. So it's an inordinate desire to have total dominion. It's the love of ruling. It's the master-slave relationship. And when David and Vera Mace talked about this, they talked about it in terms of where do you draw the line in your relationship? Is it master and slave? Is one of you up here calling all the shots and the other one's more subservient and just says, yes, okay, we'll do that. We'll do it your way.
And the line is right here.
And the line is right between you. That's the master and the slave. Or do you have a relationship where the line's between you and there's one over here having their life and the other one's over here having their life, but you're not really getting together. You're having more separate lives. The line is between you. Now, there's another place you can draw the line. Let's come right out here. Right here? Now I want to go forward.
Forward, right here?
Yeah, I want to go right here because
Right here?
I can't
Okay.
see it otherwise.
Okay.
So we're together in a relationship. We have shared responsibilities. We love one another. We're together in this. There's no dominion, and the line is underneath us. Now, just imagine that it's kind of curved, and we're here smiling. Do I still have my glasses on? Oh, that's really cool. I'm kind of getting used to looking through the eyes of love here. So where do you draw the line? Where do you draw the line in your relationship?
Okay, so where do you draw the line? Now, it sounds like all this emphasis on control might be opposite. Just let go. It doesn't matter, Don't try to control your spouse. But we're not there because we think that there is something about healthy expectations in a marriage, standards in your relationship. Many psychologists and marriage therapists talk about this one. This is called create a shared vision for your relationship. In our Rise Above It course, this is a shared vision for what our internal relationship is going to be like. It begins with things we will not do. For example, we do not interrupt. There are no put-downs. We do not ignore each other. We're not phantoms. We're real people. We do not complain, criticize, have contempt, or blame. These are the things we do not do.
We know that we have to shun the evil before we can let the Lord flow in with the good. So once we shun the evil, the Lord can flow in and help us to do these things, like we can ask, what did you mean by that when we're confused, rather than assume.
So let's talk about the things we can do.
We started it.
Okay, we allow ourselves to be influenced by each other.
We speak kindly to and about each other.
We are genuinely interested in each other.
We admire and encourage one another.
We express appreciation even for little things.
We're best friends and helpmates.
We have fun together.
We're even soulmates too. But...
Yeah, right.
Okay.
We're willing to be led by the Lord.
And we continue to grow intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. Now, if you just practice just the marriage enrichment skills that we've been talking about today and just do marriage education in your marriages, you can probably have a pretty good marriage. But if you also ask the Lord to infill your marriage with His love, His wisdom, and His power for going out in useful service, you can really have a heavenly marriage. This makes all the difference. With God, all things are possible, yet we still must do our part.
Thank you for your kind attention.
So.
have about 5 minutes, yeah. We have about 5 minutes for comments or questions, and then we have a conclusion where I'm going to tell my favorite passage and Star will share hers. But first, comments, questions.
That was a lot.
Yes. Thank you. You're a plant.
You know what? For the last 18, 20 years, Ray has been teaching this every year in the college. So the college students have been the recipients of this. And there's been other programs done within the Bryn Athyn community. So Ray's retiring this year. So we want to jump back in and do programs. We want to be doing Rise Above It. We want to do Rise Above It for couples. We've got a lot of things planned. We're not done yet. So thank you for asking.
Yeah. Other comments, questions?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, after we get the one on the Gospels actually published, it's pretty much done, but we have to get it published. We really do want to do one on Rise Above It, spiritual development for couples, and work on the marriage. From the very beginning when we got married, we really wanted to do work with marriages because we took a job as foster parent trainers in a group foster home because we wanted to work together. And we found that all the kids, all the teenagers that came to us came from broken families, and often where there was alcoholism. And we thought we're just working with the kids that have been, symptoms of something else, of failed marriages. So we wanted to work with marriages, and we finally have grown enough. We've been married for 48 years. We've gone through the trials and tribulations ourselves. We've really learned. We've really gone out there and trying to look at everything that's out there and looked at the good of it and tried to put it together in a religious space as well and know that with God with us, amazing things can happen. And we wish for wonderful relationships for everyone. So you know how old we are? And we're just getting started on this, so.
It really does feel like we're just getting started. And I'm not retiring, I'm transitioning.
Yes.
Or
okay.
we're getting back to our love for doing what we can to help people have great marriages.
Just we know the struggles in marriages too. That's why we can do this, and we also know how you can grow.
Right. We're going to lace into this book something that Peter and I did together called Happy, Joyous, and Free. Happy, Joyous, and Free is a quote from Bill Wilson, the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous. And the full quote is, God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. Avoid then the deliberate manufacture of misery. Whoa, it's a wonderful quote. And so Pete had this 12-step program for helping people get over addictions or whatever it was. And the fourth step is to have a fearless moral inventory. And in that, there's looking at all the different things the ego does and identifying the ego as not you, it's just your ego. And that separation of you from the ego is just a fantastic thing.
I know I reaped the benefits of this. While Ray and Pete were putting this program together, Ray would ask me every day, Star, do you have any upsets today? And I would say, well, he said, really think hard. So I would think hard. And I'd think, okay, well, this happened. And he'd say, well, would you want to dismantle it and separate it from your ego? I said, yeah. So he would work me through the steps and ask me the questions. And it got so that my ego doesn't come up in ways that it used to come up. I can let things go. I don't have to take it personally. Things have really changed. So this has been an amazing program. I really highly, if it ever comes out there again, good one to take.
So
I think we ought to close with
okay, so we promised that we would end with our two favorite quotes.
And my favorite quote from Conjugial Love is Conjugial Love 180. Ray, actually, I have it under here. I had a hard time with the name Star for a long time. So Ray, on our 25th anniversary, bought me, or had a made by Terry O'Sullivan, this medallion that has a star on it with diamonds around it. Because when I grew up, no one was named Star, and I was always Star. Anyway, just so I could love my name. Plus, Star and Ray go really well together. I've left that behind. But on the back of it, we have this quote, Conjugial Love 180. The blessings of married love are innocence, peace. Let these sink down into you. Innocence, peace, tranquility, inmost friendship, full trust, and a mutual desire of heart and mind to do each other every good.
And my quote is, "The conjugal between one man and one wife is the precious treasure of life and the repository of the Christian religion." Thank you.
Thank you. God bless you all. God bless your marriages.